Okay, Ashley and Pam, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let me just get back to our opening slide here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Title? Okay, great.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so we are so excited to be here. The next hour is going to be focused on the relationship between self-advocacy and success with self-direction. And my name is Ashley Ritchey. I'm the Family and Advocate Education Liaison with the Office of Education on Self-Directed Services, which is part of the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities. And I will turn it over to my co-presenter so she can introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Pamela King. I am a self-advocate.
So Pam and I have been really intentional in building our slides. We want to make sure that we're including information that is relevant to folks who have a ton of experience with self-direction and maybe have been self-directing for decades, as well as folks who are newer to the idea and the concept of self-directing their services, and folks who are here to maybe learn if self-direction is the right way to go for their own services or for their family. So let's jump right in. We welcome you to share your comments, questions, and feedback in the chat throughout our time together today. We'll keep an eye on that. And also we have dedicated time at the end of the presentation for a question and answer session. Pam, would you like to give everybody a taste of what's to come?
Sure. We are going to talk about what we do in self-advocacy and self-directions.
Absolutely. So we are going to move along to group introductions. We'd like to get to know you all a little bit better. Pam?
Please put your name in the chat and who you identify as yourself and what county you're from.
Yeah, and we'd love to know also, how long have you been self-directing? Feel free to share that information in the chat so we get a better feel for who we're talking to today. Are you a person with a disability, an adult with IDD, a family member, a professional working in the field? We'd love to hear from you. And don't be shy. Feel free.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to dive a little bit deeper into today's topics and kind of learning objectives, we're at the Self-Direction Conference, so we know that we already have something in common, and that's self-direction. So we are going to spend time on defining what self-direction is and also discuss person-centered planning, which is a super, super important piece of the self-direction puzzle. And based on my discussions with adults with disabilities who have made the decision to self-direct some or all of their services, I'm hearing that, it gives people the freedom to build a life that's super exciting, filled with important people and places and activities. And self-direction is really that way of building a service, receiving services that you need in a way that you prefer. And I'm going to jump back to our chat for a moment and just say hi to Emily and Kathy. Christine is here. Nancy is here. Okay, Hudson County is represented and brand new to self-direction. That's exciting. Victoria, glad you can join us as a support broker with Eros Group. Erica, glad you're here. Monmouth County, wonderful. Marion, thank you. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. It's good to know who's here. And Asia, glad you can make it. Yeah, so as promised, we're really going to define self-direction and also the connection between how person-centered planning kind of plays into the self-direction journey, as well as why person-centered planning is so critical when we're discussing self-direction. So if self-direction is a way of receiving services in your home or in the community of your choice, and that gives you a little bit more control and flexibility over how and when and from whom you're receiving those services, we know that self-advocacy, or the ability to speak up and let folks know what you want, what you need, as well as what you don't like, that's a really important part of self-direction as well. There's a big relationship between that. And if anybody is not familiar with self-advocacy, we're going to dive into that a little deeper in a bit, but it is the worldwide civil rights movement led for and by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So self-advocacy is about making choices, making sure that your rights are respected and your voice is heard, however you prefer to communicate. It's also about learning and getting registered to vote, being engaged in a civic way. Even if you have a legal guardian, we want to stress that you're still absolutely eligible to vote, register to vote, despite having a legal guardian. And self-advocacy in general is really about knowing your rights and letting people know how you feel and what you need. So those skills come in handy when you are self-directing. And we're going to move right along to our 6th slide here. So Pam, do you want to get us started with these kind of non-negotiables? These are the things, the guiding principles that helped us make this slideshow and talk about the things that we want to bring to you all today.
Sure. We believe that everyone can be doing self-directed services and being a self-advocate doing advocacy work. It doesn't matter if you live in anywhere, anyone can do it.
Absolutely. It's for everybody.
Yes.
And how about that person-centered piece, Pam? Our second little triangle there about people having the right to say what they want and don't want in their lives. Do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. You have the voice. You have the right to say what you want to say and talk about with your family member, and you make the final decision. You can get ideas and then you make the final decision.
And Pam, do you want to talk a little bit about how that's kind of played out in your life as someone who is self-directing?
Sure. I self-direct my services. I live in my own apartment. I do a lot of advocacy work with all people with disability.
Yeah. And when you talk about, basically supported decision making and making the decision, for example, to, find an apartment and live in your own apartment, who was part of that decision making process with you?
It was my support circle. It was my mom. It was it could be your support coordinator, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be anyone that can help you with even getting assistance to get help pay for the apartment and finding the apartment.
Absolutely. Anybody who you trust and rely on to make choices in your life and get the right information to make the best choice for you. They're kind of part of your circle of support, some people call it. And Pam, Michelle wrote into the chat, I like that Pam said the person, gets the ideas, but in self-direction, they're making their own decision, right?
Yes.
And that's kind of the idea. You get to talk about your ideas with people in your life that you trust. You're not making decision all on your own. No one does, right?
No.
We all rely on people we trust to sound off on ideas.
Yes.
Yeah. And, we talk about how planning is so crucial, right? Especially in self-direction, planning for the life that you want. I know that we have some parents of younger folks here and maybe some transition age students. Can you talk a little bit about what your transition process was like when you were leaving school, Pam, and where you went after you graduated?
Sure. What I went to college for 3 years, and then I came home, and I was home for a while because we didn't know what the next step was. And then we figured it out, and I tried working in the competitive work environment and finding activities to do and different things, and then got into self-advocacy.
And Pam, how do you think that getting involved in self-advocacy has helped you when you're self-directing your services?
It helped me a lot. It helps me to understand a little bit better about what I want in my life and what I want to do. And you can still get help with people, but you can make the final decision. And it helps you to think about it and write things down.
Absolutely. So that's how you kind of prefer to work through, if you have a new idea for something you want to try, jot it
Yeah.
down, and then you take it back to your family. I know
Yep.
mom is a big part of your circle of
Yeah.
support. Thanks. Pam, anything you want to say about, making sure you're getting just the right amount of support before we move on? Any tips for that?
Sure. Just make sure to write things down that you want to do for you, for yourself and for your family member. Like if they write things down what they want to do after school or during school, after school when they get home, they can write things down and talk to them about it and see what the next step is to get there.
Awesome. Well said. That input is so crucial. So this slide is all about self-direction. Again, we know we have this in common. We're all here today. And, we're spelling out some of the commonly used terms within self-direction, right? Within self-direction, it's often described as an alternative to provider-managed services, where the provider is, for example, responsible for hiring and training and recruiting and supervising staff who support a person with a disability in, let's say, a group home. In self-direction, the person and their trusted circle of support, the people in their life who they rely on for support and decision-making assistance, the person in the family really has the power to recruit, hire, train, and supervise staff. And in self-direction, those people are known as self-directed employees, or SDEs, because we love our acronyms, right? And then people and families also choose a fiscal management service or a financial management service that's known as a fiscal intermediary. And for folks who've been doing self-direction for a long time, these are not new phrases, but we do want to also make sure we're lowering that barrier to entry for folks who are newer to this idea. You're going to hear self-directed employee, you're going to hear fiscal intermediary or FI a lot. So we just wanted to broach those common terms. And that's kind of really the distinction, right? Self-direction, it's the person directing their services, as opposed to working with an agency that's taking on more of that responsibility of directing the services and the hiring of the staff and managing of schedules and budgets and things like that. But in New Jersey, people who self-direct can choose to self-direct all of their services, some of their services, just a portion of their services. And that might include things like hiring their own staff members, taking a class in the community, a music class, an art class, basically any class or business that's open to the general public, that's available through self-direction. And then working with a fiscal intermediary to make sure those services are paid through your budget. And again, if there's any questions or comments, feel free to drop those in the chat. But again, self-advocacy is such a critical piece here because we want to make sure the services that someone is receiving and the classes they are attending and the staff they are working with in their home and in their community, that's all based on what the person wants and their preferences and their likes and their dislikes. So just a little bit more about some of those self-directed services that are available through a self-directed employee. Support getting out and about in the community. Supports brokerage is another piece of self-direction, and supports brokers can be really, really helpful in identifying and recruiting employees for someone who's self-directing, amongst many other activities. And we have a broker here today, so it's great to make that connection and their role in self-direction. And transportation, that's a big piece. Community vendors or businesses that are operating in the community, self-directed folks who self-direct can use their budget to pay for things like assistive technology, modifying things at home to make sure that the residence that they choose is accessible. Supports goods and services, meaning those fun classes, art, music, movement classes, as well as vehicle modifications and transportation. So that's just some of the examples, and we do link the helpful resource through the state of New Jersey there on the bottom. It's also on a resources slide at the end of this presentation. This is just a snippet of kind of what's possible. So I am going to turn it over to Pam to talk a little bit about what does your self-directed week look like, Pam?
So this is my sample of what I do during the week. Like Monday, I work from 9 to 3, using transportation service to and from, going to a dog park and talk with staff from 3:30 to 7:30. Then Tuesday I work, then go grocery shopping with staff. Work Wednesday, medical appointments, staff provide transportation, peer-to-peer networking session at 6 p.m. on Zoom. And Thursday, I did a focus group on NJCAT from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. I do laundry and movie night and visit mom using Access Link and the pilot program with Uber. Cleaning crew every other Friday through the personal preference program. Concert in the park with staff. Sleep over at mom's house with my dog Lucky. Cook a delicious brunch on Sunday. Dog park, then the farmer's market with family, meal prep, and whatever else. I do a lot of other things, but this is only a sample of what I do.
Yeah, Pam, thanks for walking us
Oh, you're
through
welcome.
an example of a self-directed week. So let me ask a question. Who came up with this schedule?
I did, and I had some guidance with my mom, but I made the final decision with it.
Yeah. So it's kind of based on the things that you enjoy doing,
Yes.
what your goals are,
Yep.
and it reflects the pace of life that you're comfortable with, right? So maybe
Right.
some people's schedule would look a little bit more sparse. Maybe there's days or evenings without many activities. Some people might have every single box filled in, but it's based on what the person, and in this case, Pam, what's important to her.
And you can always change it and do new things, and then if you don't like, you can always go back to the program that you liked before.
Yeah, nothing's set in stone, as they say.
No.
Right? It's flexible. It should work with you and your goals and support needs as they may change through your life. And Pam, we did get a question in the chat. Do you want to talk a little bit about just a quick overview of the pilot program through Uber? There was a question from Michelle.
Sure. So with Access Link on, when you go to the New Jersey Transit website, there's a spot on with Access Link. You can sign up for the pilot program with Uber. The reason they're trying to help the Access Link drivers out by having this other service to get you from your from place to place. Like you don't have any add-ons, or they take you straight to where you're going.
Nice. So yeah, our recommendation would be check out the NJ Transit
Yes.
site for full details. But Pam, would you give it a thumbs up?
Yes,
Neutral? What do you think? Awesome.
thumbs up. It works.
And Assemblywoman McKnight asked, can you use the Uber all day or is it limited to certain hours? Do you know that?
No, it could, if you schedule a ride with AccessLink and if you in the pilot program, they'll give you a call the night before to let you know if it's Uber or Lyft or if it's just AccessLink. And then the next day, they'll call you, tell you your driver's on the way, and then they'll give you the name and the car, what kind of car it is, and the license plate number. And then there's a link you can click on. It goes to Uber to see where the location at. And then what I do is I copy the phone number into my text, and I text them where I'm at in my apartment. Because in my apartment, it'll go past where I'm at. So I just give them a heads up.
Good. Yeah, good call. Make sure they know exactly where you're at.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. And, another thing we want to say about kind of this self-directed schedule, right? It's again based on what Pam wants to do, what's important to her. You see the things in her life, maybe that are priorities and really important, reflected in the activities that are happening. So Pam, what would you say? Where should people start if they want to start building their own schedules? There's someone they should talk to about some of these goals?
Yes. Your family member, your support coordinator. If you don't have one, you can look for one and get a support coordinator, and the will help you with getting this process started. And then you get the NJ CAT, you do all that to see how much money you get for your budget.
Right. And support coordinators can also help you make sure that you're maintaining, you're staying within your budget, right? Not
Yes.
going over. Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, so we're going to move on and, talk a little bit more about Pam's experience with self-direction. I think, Pam, this is my favorite slide, and I think you know why.
Yes.
So, Pam, I'd like to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what brought you to self-direction. What made you decide to self-direct your services?
I did it because I wanted to have choices and make my own decision and still get help if I need help with it.
Absolutely. And no matter what service or support kind of model you're following, that's everybody's right. No matter where you're living, everybody has the right to get the support that they need and to ask for that support from people that they trust. So, Pam, I remember you mentioning maybe there was a couple goals that you had in mind at the start of your self-direction journey, and they're kind of reflected on the right side of the screen.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have a dog named Lucky. I had him since he was a puppy. He's 13 years old. He's with me in my apartment. He greets me when I get home from work or wherever I go, if I'm out, and it's a good companionship.
Absolutely. So you knew that being a dog mom
Yes.
was something that was a goal that you had,
Yes.
right? So that kind of informed what type of where you wanted to live.
Yes. It
Can
had to
you
be
talk-
someplace that accepts dogs or pets.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about that process of finding your apartment and what that's been like to live on your own in your own apartment with Lucky?
Sure. In the beginning, we were going to different apartments, and they were asking us what the voucher was, and we didn't know. we were new to it. They were new to it. But then when I came to Stony Brook, there was a property manager that used to work at someplace else, and she came here, knew exactly what it was, and she gave me a try. I've been here for 5 years, 4 or 5 years at Stony Brook.
Excellent. And I know you used the phrase voucher, right? The
Yeah, I
housing.
don't know what.
And it's, you know, there's a unit within the division that oversees the housing, you know, services, and a housing subsidy, right? That's kind of replaced that term voucher. And we like to share that just because a voucher kind of implies that you have some kind of ticket. You go, okay, I'm here for my, you know, one apartment, please. That's not necessarily the process. But like Pam said, it's really helpful when people are familiar with kind of how to navigate.
Yes.
And there are people within the division that can help answer those questions. So we're going to share resources later. But like you said, Pam, you know, some people are very familiar with the
Yes.
process of applying and using a housing subsidy to secure community, you know, an apartment in the community. And still some people are maybe not that familiar, but in either case, you know, it sounds like the spot that you're at now, do you like it? Is there anything, any recommendations you have for folks who might be interested in exploring getting
Sure,
their own apartment?
I like my apartment complex. The maintenance, when you put a maintenance request in, they'll come out the same day or the next day, or if they're backed up, we'll get an email saying they're backed up right now. We're trying our best to get to everyone. And
So they communicate when
yes,
something's okay. That's great.
and my property manager helps me with some of the costs. For instance, for for my dog Lucky, even though he's not a service dog, she considers him as a service dog, so I don't have to pay the pet fee. Like things like that. She thinks he's like a companion dog, that she considers him as a service dog.
Okay, maybe more of like an emotional support animal
Yeah.
versus a service animal.
And
Gotcha.
then like before COVID, we used to have an end of the year swim party with barbecue food and all, but then they decided to do Rita's water ice truck and then a food truck.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like it's a really active.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Pam.
Oh, you're welcome.
And just kind of moving on to, you know, that connection between self-direction and self-advocacy. A big part of self-advocacy, the kind of rally cry is nothing about us without us. So if decisions are being made about a person and their plan and their life, person is at the center of it all, right? It's literally built into person-centered planning. That's the term. So Pam, I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about some of your advocacy work. And I know you have a really cool story to share about an interaction you recently had with a
Sure.
mom.
Yeah. So I was the first graduating class up for Center for Leaders. It was based through community options. And we did a speaking engagement at the NJCD Council about what we do at the Center for Leaders. And there's one mom that was on the council. When she heard my story and bio, she said, oh, maybe I can let my son do more on his own. I'll try to back off some. And she said, and the light bulb went off on her saying, oh, maybe he can live in his own apartment, try living on his own now since she's around. And so I know what kind of service or help he needs.
I love that. You know, when we were talking about it, you described it as that light bulb moment. She said a
Yeah.
light bulb went off in listening to you and hearing about your experience and seeing the great work you're doing, you know, acknowledging, hey, maybe we can give this a try.
Yes.
You know, build in those chances to speak up and say, let's make decisions supported as you need, but let's see about making decisions and figuring out, what you want to do and how you can advocate for yourself.
Yes.
That's awesome. And we're going to move right along. Awesome. And Pam, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. Thanks for sharing. Love to hear that. Wonderful. Thank you. So yeah, when we talk about self-advocacy and self-direction, we do think they're kind of perfect together. They work in tandem. If self-advocacy is a movement, right, the civil rights movement led for and by people with disabilities, self-advocacy skills, things like leadership, things like civic engagement, things like making decisions and speaking up, communicating your needs effectively, that all plays into self-direction, right? So Pam, I'm going to let you kick it off here. I'd love to hear, this is a direct quote from you that came up when we were planning. Can you say more about this
Sure.
top bullet here?
The more you know, the better off you'll be. It's the same thing as self-direction and doing self-advocacy. You have the right to do advocacy work. Doesn't matter if you're in a group home, supported apartment, living on your own, or with family members or friends. Anyone can do advocacy work. Doesn't matter if you speak or not. You can use a communication devices or whatever you have to help you. You all have the right to self-direct your services and be a self-advocate.
Absolutely. And I also want to put a plug in for, like Pam said, some people identify as non-speakers or spellers. Especially, parents of younger folks with disabilities, really building in opportunities to learn what communication device or assistive technology or method of communication works best for me, the person, the loved one, and the family. Because there's so many options out there. If you Google spelling as communication, you'll find a ton of resources. And, we really want to make sure people find that preferred method of reliable communication so that self-advocacy skills like, speaking up for yourself, letting people know how you feel, what you want, what you don't want. Maybe I'm getting too much support and I want someone to back off, though that can be communicated more efficiently, more effectively. And the more that you flex that advocacy muscle, it grows, right? If you start early and often, the person's going to be even stronger and feel even more comfortable in that decision-making role as they get older. So we're going to touch on person-centered planning here. Person-centered planning is, a way of figuring out where we're going next, right? And it puts the person at the center of everything. So a good person-centered plan involves, asking, what do you want, right? Like, let's laser focus on that person within the context of their whole life and the people that are important to them and the places that are important to them. And what do you need to make the best choice for yourself? Do you still have questions about things? How can we research things together and make sure you're comfortable with the decision you're making? What's not in your life right now that you really want? And there's no wrong answer there, right? And then figuring out also, who is that trusted confidant? Who are those people in your life who you consider your circle of support? And the division has a whole homepage focused on person-centered planning, because that is, when this is best practice and it's put into practice, everybody's better off, right? Outcomes are better. You have buy-in from the person at the start. So that's really what we want to see. And it's definitely in line with best practices in support and planning. And speaking of planning, the Office of Education on Self-Directed Services hosts peer-to-peer networking sessions. So our 4th session is coming up on December 5th, and we are currently meeting on Zoom from 6 to 7:30, December 5th. And the group is really, the intended audience is adults with disabilities who are self-directing some or all of their services. The Office of Education on Self-Directed Services also has a family networking session. They're wonderful. They're happening in person as they have happened virtually in the past as well. And all that information is available on the OESDS website. But for right now, we're focusing on the peer-to-peer networking sessions for adults with disabilities. So at the session that we had in June, the members were asked, where do you want this group to go? What are some things that we want to build on that we're already involved in, right? So Pam mentioned before the Center for Advocacy Leaders, the Division Self-Advocacy Advisory Committee, Partners in Policy Making, the Statewide Self-Advocacy Network, all of these other great advocacy organizations that are doing great work. How do we collaborate, build, enhance, and where do we want to see this specific group, the peer-to-peer networking sessions, go? And a lot of it was about sharing resources, right? What's out there? We so often rely on word of mouth, and we want to make sure there's a really robust, strong group of advocates that are sharing those resources together and sharing experiences too. What's working? What's not? Here's something I learned on my self-direction journey. I want to share it with you all. And it's also a more informal place to kind of network and socialize. There's been great connections that have been made. And I bring this up because this is the trajectory that came fully informed by the members, adults with disabilities who are self-directing. The Office of Education, the division staff, were transcribing these ideas. We're plugging them into these different boxes, but we didn't come in saying, here's what we want to do. That wouldn't be self-direction, right? That wouldn't be self-advocacy. So I use this as an example. It was so awesome to see a shared, the collective work that folks want to do to make sure that self-direction education is available to as many people as possible. So I'm going to jump to the next slide. And you know what? It relates to a question from Kathy that just came in the chat. Pam, do you have an organized group of members that meets regularly as your circle of support? Or is it more of an informal group that you call on? Can you describe what that kind of looks like when you make a decision?
Okay, yes. So we'll sit down with my mom and my brother and we'll talk about it and write things down, and they'll give me the support and what they would their ideas, and then I'll make the final decision, and they'll go along with what I decide.
Excellent. So right now, your circle to support family,
Yeah.
support coordinator.
Yep.
Are there other trusted folks in the circle right now, or are you looking to grow that?
Direct support professional. I don't know who else. But we're gonna be making a list of my support, my circle support, and it could all change.
Right, flexible based on who's who you're wanting to be part of that circle. Thank you for the question, Kathy, and thank you, Pam, for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
And Michelle, you asked, is the next peer-to-peer networking session, it is on December, now I'm checking my calendar, Tuesday, December 5th from 6 to 7:30. And you're correct, it is on Zoom. Again, we listened to the members. We asked the members at the last 3 sessions, do you want to host an in-person event? Do you want to continue meeting virtually? We sent out a survey after each meeting, and resoundingly, the response was, stay virtual. We're meeting from 6 to 7:30 to avoid conflicting with work, different things going on during the day. That time was preferred by the members. So we are listening to the members. We're continuing to meet on Zoom. And if you're interested, I'm going to share my contact information as well as Pam's contact in just a bit as we wrap up. So please, I'd love to hear from you. You're also welcome to write into the Office of Education on Self-Directed Services help desk. If you have questions, that's available on our website. But yeah, we'd love for you to join, Michelle. Thanks. So Pam, This is kind of like our closing question
Yes.
that we pitch to the group, and then we welcome open questions. How can family members and staff support self-advocacy skill building throughout someone's lifetime? What's your recommendation? Can you talk about that?
Sure, you can talk to your family member about this. You can talk to your teachers, teacher's aide, bus driver, anyone that you trust and that respect you. You can talk about what you want to do during school, after school, when you're going out of the school system totally. And you can like, you don't have, if you're graduating, you don't have to rush to think on it. You can like take some time to think on it.
Absolutely. It's not a rush, right? And I like also you
No.
said before, nothing is set in stone. Nothing's done that can't be undone. If you want to try something new and you figure out, I'm not really wild about this, I want to maybe go back to an activity I was doing before. That's within your rights. That's available to you. We also really want to stress the importance of building an opportunity for decision making early in life and often. For very young folks, it might involve like, what do you want to wear today? Right? With some edits, chilly out in Jersey today. So maybe there needs to be some input. But as often as possible, figuring out how can I help this person, this young person with disability, make a choice that they're comfortable with, and they're kind of leading that process. What are you wearing? What are you eating? What are you doing after school? Who are you spending time with? What do you want to do for your birthday? All these things are opportunities for choice and decision making that ultimately can build into who are you voting for? Where do you want to live? Who do you want to have in your life as an adult and share a partnership with? These are all things that play into building the life of meaning and personal significance. So IEP meetings, we talked about this being a great place. Individualized education plan meetings, they happen every year, right? So involve the student, at least make sure they're in the room when it's happening. And, typically when someone's in the room and their plan is being discussed and their goals are being discussed, maybe everyone's a little bit more aware of that and how the person can be brought into the fold and make those decisions or inform that planning. Pam, anything you'd like to add to this? Recommendations for building self-advocacy skills?
Yeah. To meet, you can meet other people that are self-directing your services or doing advocacy work and network and talk to other people. And have you son and daughter involved with it when you sit down talk to somebody else that been through, like if they're in school, if they're out of school in their own apartment or doing whatever, you can have some networking that would help for to start the process.
Yeah, even like sitting in on some of those advocacy meetings and then the parent, staff member fades back, let the person participate more actively. Yeah, because we've seen that, right? We understand family members want to say like, what's going on at these meetings? What are they like? Who are the people involved? And especially virtually, you can kind of like maybe sit to the side, listen in, see what's going on until that comfort level is built. And yeah, that's a good recommendation, Pam. And figuring out what's just the right amount of support. And that looks different for everybody, right? There's no one size fits all for almost anything. But especially with self-direction and self-advocacy. Some people are going to be more comfortable with that process. Some people are going to want to have more say in their planning and in these more technical pieces of building the plan. And as much as possible, we want to meet people where they're at and identify those areas for growth and experience. So yeah, before we get to Q&A, looking forward, Pam, what's our kind of goals? What are we really looking to see with self-direction?
is to have everyone to do advocacy work. If you're interested in doing it, check out the meetings. To check out all the different advocacy meetings, and then decide which one you want to do, and sort out that way for the advocacy stuff. And for the self-direction, just start writing things down that come to your mind. And then once you get a whole list, then sit down with your support, get your support coordinator involved, and have a discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, we want to see people preparing well in advance for transition, right? Before you're leaving school, what's the plan? What are we doing? What do we want to focus on? Where are we headed? And the trajectory that I showed you before, it's available through the Charting the Life course website, and it's a really cool worksheet that can kind of be used to make a plan for post-school life, the next phase of adult life. It's a really useful tool. And we just want to see people have access to a variety of supports, right? Including those residential options. Picking the place where you're getting just the right amount of support, not too much, not too little, just kind of that sweet spot based on your needs. So yeah, as promised, we're going to make time for Q&A. And I know it is 3:01 right now. And we do want to respect everybody's time. I am going to paste our contact information in the chat as we wait and see. Is anybody going to share a comment or question? Feel free to add that in the chat right now. And I'm also sharing Pam's email address, my email address. We welcome you to reach out if you have any questions or comments after today's session. And then also, as promised, some great resources through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. This is the Office of Education on Self-Directed Services, also known as OESDS, the OESDS homepage. There is a homepage dedicated to all of the division's self-advocacy programming. I am the contact for the self-advocacy programming, so I welcome you to reach out if you have any questions or want to get involved. There's also a homepage for self-direction, person-centered planning. And then, as I mentioned before, the Charting the Life course toolkit is really great. The trajectory that the peer-to-peer group filled out, completed for their planning process is available on that website for free. And the Boggs Center has some great resources about understanding self-direction, how to self-direct, to making that decision, as well as selecting a support coordination agency, which Pam highlighted the importance of before. Awesome. And for those of you who did add questions before, thank you so much. Pam, is there anything you'd like to say to round out the session?
I would like to thank everyone for participating today, and hope we got a lot of information out of it. And if you have any questions after the session, you can email me. That's what is put in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Awesome. You guys did fantastic. Thank you so much. That concludes the workshop, Self-Advocacy, an Essential Element for Self-Direction Success. Thank you, Ashley and Pam, for sharing your knowledge and resources.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me doing it.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job.